This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hello everybody, welcome to another video. We've all seen this style of nightstand on Facebook Marketplace. They're easy to find, they're usually fairly inexpensive. They come from big box stores like The Brick and Ashley Furniture. You may remember me refinishing a pair just a couple of weeks ago where I did partial wood and partial paint. I added new oak pulls and this set was night and day from what I started with. Well, I bought another set of these big box store nightstands, and the question I'm posing here is, can you refinish these? How hard is it? What are your options? Don't be fooled by these pieces. They are not cheap to buy in store. Most of them are at least a few $100s and they go right up to, I've seen even $1,000. But in my experience, most of them are made with cheaper products, inferior wood. So is that going to limit what you can do with them? And the answer is yes. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. So I just want to have a closer look at this one here. This is very similar to the pair that I did a few weeks ago. And you can see here, it literally says cherry at the top. These are not made of cherry, and I see it all the time, people think that they are. But if you have a look at the description here, it actually says that there's a 7-step color treatment with a lacquer coating that gives it that cherry color. It still doesn't tell you that it's not cherry wood, and some people miss that, but if you scroll down further, you can actually see here that this is actually made of Asian hardwood, which we call here rubber wood. That's a super common construction material in these sort of mediocre night tables and dresser sets. But on these ones here that I purchased, it's not the same wood grain, so I'm not sure yet what these are made of. I have no idea what these pieces are. They obviously go to some other piece of furniture. If you ever have trouble getting these drawers out, there's usually a little plastic tab. Just push that down with your finger and it should help them pop right out. I always number the drawers as I take them out so I know exactly where they go. Now, having a look at this, it's not the best finish in the world. You can see it's quite blotchy and patchy. It's made in China. I have a feeling this is some sort of inferior wood, and I have a feeling that this might even be a mix of hardwood and softwood like pine. What I initially wanted to do with these was try to get all of this old finish off and give these like a whitewash. This finish is notoriously difficult to completely get out of the wood, and it's because they use some sort of a dye stain as the base layer, and it just soaks into those wood fibers, and oftentimes these are actually veneer mixed with solid wood, so you can only sand down so far. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my favorite stripper here, which is circa 1850. And I like circa 1850 because you don't have to neutralize it after, and there's no methylene chloride in it. Don't get me wrong, it's still toxic as all get out, but it's a lot better than having methylene chloride. The first time you try to strip one of these crazy finishes off, you'll actually feel a little bit hopeful. And the reason is that lacquer coating comes off quite easily along with quite a bit of the color. You can see here, even in the time it just takes me to wipe this on, a lot of that colored lacquer is coming off. Don't be fooled! There's a lot more work ahead of you, because the dye stain is the hardest part to get out. And it's not so bad on big flat surfaces like the top, but when you get into those rounded edges and any areas where there's carvings or fluted detail, oh, it is a nightmare. So you can see as I start stripping here, it does look hopeful. There's a whole lot of color coming off, but you can see that the wood underneath, which is very pale, still has a lot of that reddish tint. And as I uncover even more, you can see these weird, crazy swirl marks underneath. I'm not sure what happened there. I've never seen that under a finish. And the fact that you couldn't see that through the top coat really goes to show how many layers of opaque color are actually on there. I'm going to add a little bit of this that I just scraped off. I'm going to put it back on that spot, and I should be able to scrape that off in a few minutes. When it comes to the edges, sometimes I'll use my same scraping putty knife here to get off most of the gunk, but my favorite tool for edges is this nylon bristle brush. The bristles are stiff enough that they remove the debris, but they're not as harsh as a wire brush. You can also use a 3M stripping pad or steel wool for this part. I actually considered adding more modern legs to these pieces, but I ultimately decided to reuse the ones that came with it. So these are going to be difficult to sand. I'm going to have to hand sand, so I want to get as much of the finish off as possible, so I'm just coating this here with the excess stripper. By this point, I'm getting a better sense of what's underneath here. Not so much the species of wood, but I'm pretty sure that there's both hardwood and softwood here. I can't identify it. Seeing this much red still in the wood is definitely disheartening, and it was at this point that I thought, okay, I'm probably not going to be able to do a whitewash because I don't want to risk any of that red color bleeding through. I just didn't want to run the risk. So as I'm continuing to remove all of this stripper, I'm playing over several different scenarios in my head for how I'm going to refinish these. I'm undecided on the hardware that came with this. I'm not in love with it, but this is something you really need to take into account when you're redoing pieces to sell. For example, when I mentioned I was considering putting new legs on, those legs were close to $15 a piece. Multiply that by 8, that's a pretty good chunk of change. And then the two top drawers have 4 knobs each, so that's 8 pulls there, plus 2 on the bottom. It adds up really quickly. Considering that these are not an overly desirable wood, you really have to take that into account when you're doing this to flip. When your main goal is to have a quick turnaround and be on to the next piece, you don't want to be spending, $100, $150, $200 in hardware on a piece that you can probably get at most, in my area, about $400 for the set. But these are fantastic pieces to experiment on, which is what I'm going to be doing with the finish today. This is what the nightstands look like when they've been completely stripped. I added just a little bit of extra stripper and I'm using some steel wool just to see if I can get any more off, but it is minimal. It's pretty much as good as it's gonna get. So I grabbed Mr. DeWalt and I'm using, I believe, a 100 grit sand pad, which is a little bit coarser than I normally like to use, but I'm not feeling very optimistic by this point. You can see the wood is very, very light, and the sanding is getting a lot of that residual dye stain out, but there's still some areas that I just know are going to cause me problems. By this point, I was feeling pretty frustrated. I considered painting it. I actually made a community post kind of sharing my frustrations, and there was a tipping point where time put in stops yielding return on investment, and I was actually at this point already. This is the second day of work on this. I'm at least probably, I'd say, about 10 hours into this project, and it's not even fully sanded yet. So even at this point, I was considering painting it, but I am really stubborn. And another idea had actually come to me as to what I wanted to do with these. You guys have seen me use Odie's oil and Mr. Cornwall's creative colors on hardwoods like elm, but I've never used it on softwood, and I have a feeling that it would be a bit like using a penetrating stain on softwood, which is not always the best idea. Normally you would use a wood conditioner prior to that, but I thought this might actually be a good test. And the inspiration I had at this point was to go with a bit of a barnwood, weathered, kind of rustic look, similar to our headboard in the bedroom. I thought when I picked these up that this would be a great video to show a beginner-friendly nightstand flip, and if I'd painted it, it probably would have fit that mold, but what I chose to do here, it's not beginner-friendly and it's not easy. It's very time-consuming and frustrating. Now this has been a whole lot of stripping and scraping and sanding, so we're going to pause here for just a moment for a quick word from today's sponsor, and then I'm going to show you something really, really cute. So I wanted to show you guys where I edit my videos. So this is my editing computer here, And right here is my little microphone setup. It is not fancy. It is literally foam panels here and a cardboard box, but it does the trick. It does what it's supposed to do. For me, doing furniture on YouTube is kind of an expression of, or an extension of me, for lack of a better term. I'm not a furniture flipping university. Basically, I started my channel to document what I do on a daily basis and kind of take you guys along for the ride, and then it turned into this big crazy thing. People ask me all the time about competition in YouTube, and yeah, we're all competing for your views at the same time, but for me anyway, my experience has been that the furniture community is a lot like a family. We all sort of have our own vibe, we have our own way of filming things, we have our own way of editing, our own style, and these things are what set us apart, really honing in on our own style and what we want to say. Skillshare is an online learning community with literally thousands of awesome classes. They're ad-free. You can tailor it to your specific needs. Let's say you want to unwind a little bit, do some yoga, but you're only a beginner and you only have 15 minutes. By checking off these parameters, it will only show you classes within that skill level and that time frame. And going back to what I said earlier about how all of us YouTubers have our own sort of style, this class I'm going to show you is one of the ones I'm talking about. This one is called YouTube Video Editing. It's done by Becky Peckham, and it's about developing your signature style. And videos like this just kind of help you hone in on that individual creativity. So the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description box below is going to get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Definitely check it out and let me know what classes you're checking out. Okay, I promised you some cuteness. Here it is. This is our newest addition to the family. This is Nacho. This little monkey is one of the most well-adjusted kittens I've ever seen in my life. He's so affectionate and sweet, and he's adorable. Nacho came from a litter who was unfortunately orphaned when their mom was hit by a car. And we later found out that he was bottle fed but was nurtured and raised, in a sense, by a piggy. He's from a local cat rescue and we are madly in love, so if you'd like to see more Nacho bits in upcoming videos, just let me know in the comments below. A while back, the kind folks at Odie's Oil sent me a little present in the mail, and it was all of these jars of creative colors, and there's so many beautiful colors here to choose from, but what I think I'm going to do for this piece is use some Odie's Safer Solvent, some of the Super Duper Everlasting Oil. I'm using the color Chocolate Lab and Up in Smoke, and I'm going to mix those two together in this pickled jalapeno jar. And that's going to give me a custom stain. Now, what's nice about mixing your own stains with these products is that you can control how saturated or unsaturated the stain is. In other words, how intense it is. It can be tricky with hardwood because it doesn't absorb the stain as much. I'm a little bit apprehensive about putting it on softwood because, like I said before, I feel like it's going to be a little bit like a penetrating stain where it might not absorb entirely evenly. For the style that I'm going for, that sort of rustic, old barn board feel, that's not going to be a huge issue. If I was trying to do a beautiful finish similar to the one I did on this piece a week or so ago, that would be a different story. I would probably end up using a different product, and it's not because these are inferior products, it's just that I would want to use wood conditioner beforehand, and I don't know if I can use a wood conditioner before I use these products, so that's something I'm going to experiment with, and I'll let you know what the results of that little testing is. Now you'll notice a huge difference here with the bun feet versus the back legs that I just showed you. These ones are actually solid hardwood and the stain absorbs very differently. I'm hoping that won't be a huge issue at the end. This foot was missing the little nail-on plastic slide on the bottom, so I just added a new one. I'm going to put the feet back on and stand this piece up before I start staining and oiling the rest of the piece. Finally, I'm ready to start staining the main body. The very top seems to be a slightly different wood than these edges here, so they're going to absorb the stain a little bit differently. I'm hoping it's not going to look terrible. I already know this is not going to appeal to some people, and that's totally fine. All I ask is that you be kind, because this style actually sells really well in my area. I live in the valley in Nova Scotia. It's where all the agriculture is, horse farms. People love this sort of barnboard, western, rustic look. So while this won't appeal to everyone, I don't think I'll have any problems selling these. Going back to my initial question, which was, can you refinish these big box store night tables and dressers? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it really depends what you want to do with it. These are great for beginners to practice on, but not always for getting that stellar mint finish without a lot of product and a lot of time. They're readily available, they're not overly expensive when you buy them used, and they're great for trying out new products, new techniques, kind of like what I'm doing here. They look fabulous painted, but the problem I've run into with them is that the materials are hit or miss. You could end up with really good wood underneath, stuff without a lot of imperfections and patchwork, or you can end up with something that has glue stains everywhere, chips that were patched with filler, and none of that matters on these pieces because of how much color they put into the finish as they apply it. So when you strip it down to its raw form, you're left to deal with all of that. If you see a set of these on Marketplace, go grab them, give them a shot. Worst case scenario, you can always paint it. Thank you so much for watching this experiment of sorts, and I will see you next time.